Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1 Part 2 of What If Quirks Were Outlawed. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the story. Their gazes snapped to the green-haired boy in tandem. All of them were bewildered by his declaration, though all for different reasons. At that moment, it felt like the combined weight of their trepidation was smothering the life out of him. Midoriya's mouth felt like it was packed with cotton. He swallowed sharply. "What the hell are you talking about, Midoriya?" Bakugo barked, still reeling from his traumatic head injury. "Did you drill some of your idealistic trash into this boy's head?" Stain parted his lips into a snarl, dark beaded hues drilling into Toshinori with contempt. "No, I can assure you that I didn't." The blonde-haired vigilante laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know what made him want to say anything like that. I thought I painted a pretty poor picture of our lives, actually." "You didn't, Mr. Toshinori," Midoriya interjected, finally regaining his footing. The young man wouldn't allow his savior to backtrack and talk he and his friends down for the sake of convincing him. He may have only been a youth, but the consequences of choosing such a restless life bore onto him relentlessly. Just taking one look at these men, and he knew that their lives were nothing if not tumultuous. "Me and Bakugo," he started, clearing out the cobwebs in his throat with a soft cough. "We don't have any direction in our lives. I'm going to end up as some salaryman." Green eyes glassed the scene until they met with Bakugo's. Midoriya's expression softened. "And Kaken is something special. I don't want to see him tortured anymore just because his quirk is good." Wells of water welled up in his eyes, though the ball of his thumb dispatched of them almost immediately. Now was not the time to show weakness. He deserves to be able to use that quirk for good. "And I can help too, even if I'm quirkless. Somehow, some way, I don't know." The youth gazed at his shoes, fully realizing just how much of a stretch it was for this idea to come into fruition. It was then that a firm hand met his shoulder. "I once knew someone like us." I think these two remember him fondly as well. "He didn't have a quirk either," Toshinori started, tilting the boy's chin up to look him in the eyes. His aura was so warm, yet waning. There was something terribly wrong with him, but Midoriya was hard-pressed to discern what. The old man seemed ill, yet he did just as much work as us. Tore through the drug trade like a man on fire. "I'm sure you can make a difference too, young man." He wheezed and sputtered, sinking to a squat as his fist eclipsed his mouth. "Knuckleduster was a good man. We really shouldn't rope these kids into our mess, though. You know that's irrational," Aizawa added, massaging his eyes with a thumb and forefinger. "If you think it's because we're weak, we're not. I can handle myself." Bakugo growled. Shades of his tenacity always found a way to peek through the veil. The atomic blonde couldn't help himself when it came to proving a point, even if it wasn't a point he necessarily wanted to prove. "You wouldn't stand a chance out there, boy. You were nearly snuffed out by a gang of snot-nosed street rats and some quirkless middle schooler had to save you." "Don't get cocky," Stain hissed, each word dripping with venom so emphatic that even the aggressive young man had no choice but to back down. This one was different than the other two, far more ominous. They could feel his conviction emanating from him like a cloud of black, suffocating smoke. "Why, you weren't there," Bakugo retorted weakly. The young man could barely stand up straight due to his injury. All the yelling caused veins to bulge from his temples like worms wriggling through loose dirt. "If I were, then nobody would have died, you little brat." Sharp and poignant, like a dagger digging into both of the boys' hearts. "These kids don't belong here, Toshinori. Stop imposing this foolish optimism on anyone who lends you an ear. You'll get more people killed." Every word Stain uttered stung with the pressure and malicious intent of a bullet. Even this phrase seemed to negatively affect the older vigilante, causing him to cast a forlorn gaze away from everyone. "That was a bit much," Toshinori replied. "They're just children. Let them have their fantasies. I don't do this to let teenagers frolic around like everything is okay. It won't be okay until the AQTF and all the dirty little cretins of this town are called." "That's not fair," the green-haired boy spoke up in defense. "Kaken and Mr. Toshinori put everything on the line to help people. Kaken fought tooth and nail against several people trying to kill him. And if you don't think that is worthy of respect, then you aren't similar to Mr. Toshinori at all." "I never called myself a hero, kid," Stain replied. "But that's fair. Do what you want, I don't care." The room settled into an uncomfortable silence. The masked vigilante went back to scraping his knives against a whetstone, acting as if nothing had transpired at all. He still harbored that frightening intensity, even in the dense quiet that accompanied them. Midoriya dug his chin into the webbing of his hand, staring pensively in no particular direction. These three seemed tied together more by circumstance than by camaraderie, especially Toshinori and Stain. Their ideas on how to solve crime were disconnected from one another, with the tired-eyed man serving as some sort of mediator to bridge the gap. Could he and Bakugo really fit into such a disjointed group? Would it even be an intelligent decision to try and dive headlong into a profoundly immoral underbelly at their age and skill level? most importantly, with this world completely revealed to them, a stark juxtaposition of how they once lived, could they turn away and return to their normal lives? Could he live with that bearing down on his conscience? Midoriya shook his head. Let's do it, Midoriya. The freckle-faced teen turned his attention to the voice, almost shocked to find that Bakugo said it. What? The reply was instinctive. Let's be heroes, or vigilantes, or whatever the hell these guys are. Time to show that bastard what we're made of. Stain glanced up with ire tainting his ruby irises at the backhanded comment. What do you say? The young man clutched the back of his skull, obviously still under the effects of a serious concussion. Of course, Kakin. The Viridian-haired teen flashed his most winning smile, glad to find his old friend at the same place he was. Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called We The Celestial Naruto What If. We The Celestial Naruto What If mainly focuses on our Naruto What If series. If you are interested in content like this, please go check the description below or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. The boys hadn't steeled themselves for what was to come. The level of physical exertion and mental fortitude it took to keep up with these storied veterans was nothing to scoff at. They were barely 15 when they had to tighten those shivering hands and look towards the future. From their perspective, molding their bodies and spirits into what their mentors needed seemed just short of insurmountable. Bakugo always had the tenacity to keep him from faltering. His sheer force of will had enough strength to erode mountains and shape oceans. All the atomic blonde had to do was put his mind to it, and there wasn't a thing in existence that had the gall to block his path. The dogged youth would just burst through whatever obstructed him to the other side. Perhaps not unscathed, but better because of it. He flourished in strife. Midoriya, on the other hand, had never experienced this level of punishment. His experience as an adolescent was a decidedly average one, with menial goals and lackluster hobbies. What fueled him was his unwillingness to subscribe to that restless life. That little spark, realizing that there was more than just a well-paying job and school and friends, it single-handedly wrought a fighting spirit in the pit of his chest. With tear-soaked cheeks and burning lungs and taut muscles brining in lactic acid, he refused to quit. Even without a quirk, with no advantage and no previous combat experience, he met his much more adventurous comrade's pace. It took every ounce of conviction he had to continue on this tumultuous journey. And when he came out the other side, dismantled whole and rebirthed, he smiled in spite of it. Bakugo grimaced beneath his ballistic mask. It was their first foray into the criminal underworld alone, and it had already turned sour. The anti-quirk task force bastards never did anything on this side of town. Why'd they have to turn up now? He and Midoriya, beneath the dull shroud of night, hunkered behind the shielding embrace of a shipping container as the so-called protectors of the peace prowled like ravenous hyenas. The sounds of their heavy combat boots spurning the concrete floor of the warehouse caused the boys to wince. Some concerned citizen had phoned them after the blonde engulfed a handful of thugs with a controlled blast. Nothing too extreme either, just enough to put them out of commission until the police arrived. The prevailing issue, though, was that not all of the criminals had been dealt with yet, and, more importantly, they were meant to be gone by the time the brass turned up on scene. Instead, the duo of neophyte vigilantes were under the scrutiny of a dozen or so highly trained, ready-to-kill security officers bolstered by full support of the government. Slow, shallow, silent breaths escaped their lips. Nothing could have prepared them for this. Emerald eyes crept around the container, peering down a narrow pathway into the nearest clearing. His hues met the gaze of another, one of the criminals that they were meant to dispatch of. His chest heaved like a bellow, his sharp features contorted into primal fear. The young ruffian cleared his throat a little too loud, an action he immediately regretted. In a fluid motion with the fluidity of water and the suddenness of a car accident, one of the agents whipped around the corner with a backfist to the boy's nose. His body impacted the cover he had so recently found solace in with a dull thump. The adolescent was reduced to one knee, clutching his battered face as the officer dug the steel toe of his boot into his chin. This time, much to Midoriya's shock, the urchin barely budged. His skin had calcified, turning the once terrified miscreant into a stalwart force of nature. An uppercut to the solar plexus, a haymaker to the jaw, shattered goggles, a frayed balaclava. The burgeoning belligerent picked the task force agent apart on the feet until he slumped to the ground, losing consciousness. Sweltering heat flooded the corridor as the boy's body imprinted against the opposing cement wall. The sheer force shattered the stone like glass, a cascade of splintered concrete skittering across the ground like insects retreating from an upturned stone. Billowing flames consumed hallway as a singular, ominous silhouette split through the oppressive orange and gray. This was someone they both recognized. Enji Todoroki, codenamed Endeavor. His visage contorted into scowl as he glowered down at the incapacitated boy. "We have to do something," Midoriya blurted out in a hushed tone. "What the hell are you talking about? It's just some criminal." his partner responded, clenching his jaw at the sight of such a staunch opponent. The freckle-faced teen's legs shifted on their own. He launched himself at full throttle, defying every ounce of trepidation that permeated through the synapses in his brain. It didn't matter who the person was, so long as he saved them in their time of need. The look in that bastard's eyes wasn't that of a protector. He was a killer, through and through. He planned to scorch that poor, helpless teen until he amounted to nothing but charred bone. A metal mandible locked around his frown. A flick of a wrist deployed his baton. His other hand tugged a tear gas grenade from the chest rig, donning his toned form. With the pluck of a pin, a plume of smoke emanated from the nozzle at its head. It skidded across the ground and enveloped the scene entirely. Now the green-haired boy had time to think. Or so he hoped. Scorching, palpable heat bellowed down the corridor and threatened to eviscerate him where he stood if it wasn't for the swiftness of his partner in crime. Both of the boys slid down an adjacent hall. Midoriya found himself practically hyperventilating from the adrenaline pulsing through his body. Oh God. Izuku swallowed sharply. Shit, you could have died. Let's G back. Hugo swiveled his head just as Endeavor stepped around the corner. As the red-haired demon raised his hand to cremate the vigilantes, a tetrad of throwing knives seamed his forearm. He howled, immediately withdrawing the arm and bringing his attention to the culprit. Stain launched from out of view with a spinning heel kick that put the enforcer nearly through the steel wall of the nearest shipping container. Can't you cretins stay out of trouble? Stain growled, voice laden with contempt. His gangly fingers tugged at the hilt of his katana. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer for this video, as well as the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out mortals, have an amazing day.